Hello and welcome back to my channel for the third week of third grade. If you are new here, my name is Fletcher Nelson. I'm a third grade teacher in Minnesota and this is my 10th year of teaching. So I am trying to be better at taking you guys along with me and talk about what I do each week in my classroom. So again, with coaching this year and a new math curriculum and a lot of other things that are time consuming, instead of doing this every day, I'm just doing a end of the week check-in probably until the volleyball season is over. So right now it is Sunday. I came in to get a few things ready and I'm going to just tell you what we did last week. I've also been really good about not coming in on weekends, but obviously I want to record this video, and with it being homecoming week and just the madness it was last week, there's a couple things I just want to get prepared, so I'm feeling better for the start of the week. So here we go. Last week it was homecoming week, like I said, like 7 times now, and that threw off our week a little bit, just of like we had like a pep rally added, we had the parade and a few other things. So our schedule was thrown off a tiny bit, but overall we got most of our stuff in that I wanted to. So let's start again with reading. This week in reading we focused on genre. So we've now talked about theme, we've talked about point of view, and now this week we talked about genre. So I like to start with these topics because they are all things I can bring up in every single book I read to them, because with our reading curriculum we do read a picture book. It's supposed to be every day, but you can't always get it there. So we read 3 or 4 picture books a week, and I can bring up these topics that I'm starting with in every book just to keep that conversation going. So I started the first day just talking about the word genre and what it meant, and then we talked about the difference between fiction and nonfiction books. So I've had this book for fiction, or this video for fiction and nonfiction, and then just talked about how the word genre basically means categories, and there's genres of movies, there's genres of music, and there's also genres of books. And we just started with the first, like the main two, just the categories, fiction and nonfiction. And then I had some examples that we read through, and they decided whether they thought this was a fiction passage or a nonfiction passage. Since the majority of our read alouds so far have been fiction books, I decided to dive into the different types of fiction books on day 2. We reviewed what genre meant and how there's different genres of more than just books. There's genres of music and movies. I watched this video just talking about the different genres of fiction and as a little introduction, and then we looked at some of the books that we've read, and then I also had these posters I'll show you right now. So we went through some of these and then talked about what genre we thought it would be for fiction. So as you can see here at the front of my room, I added these after we talked into it, so I just put genres in the middle just because so I keep seeing that word. And then I did on Tuesday of last week, I put the fiction ones up. So I put fiction, made up stories. I've been really talking about how it's just the author's imagination that they're using to teach us different lessons or to write a story that entertains us. And the genres of fiction that we focused on were realistic fiction, historical fiction, adventure, mystery, science fiction, and fantasy. We have read quite a few realistic fiction books, so I put some of the book covers of ones that we have read and ones that we will read on there. I have read 2 I Survived books now, so they have read 2 of those historical fiction books, so we talked a lot about those. I put some examples of books they have probably read on their own or in the past for adventure and mystery, and we just talked about what those books would look like. And then again for fantasy, we had read Sylvester and the Magic Pebble, so that was a fantasy book for sure. And yeah, that was on day 2. We just talked about those genres. And again, now every single time we read a book, once we identify whether it's fiction or nonfiction, now we can break it down more specifically. What type of fiction book are we reading or nonfiction? On Wednesday, then, we talked about nonfiction books and about how they're true stories or it's factual information. And the types of nonfiction we focused on were biography, autobiography, and informational. So we have read, Thank You, Mr. Falker, which again is going to be about Patricia Polacco's life, that narrative story. So include that in the autobiography poster because she did write that about her own life. And then informational books. Last week we did read a few informational books for our reading series, so that was good timing for that. And then we just talked about how a biography is about a book that somebody else wrote about someone's life. So I knew in 2nd grade they had read Salt in His Shoes because the teachers borrowed it from me. And then Adam Thielen is from the town I teach in, so we talked about how this book is about his life, but he did not write it, so that would be a biography. was all we really got to in reading, because then we had the homecoming parade and a few other interruptions, like we had a fire drill and stuff like that. So, and bus safety. So had a few things that threw off our schedule in the morning a little bit. But talked about genre, and now I want to make an interactive notebook piece for them to come back to. I will make some graphic organizers that will just have some of these, categories for them to fill in for the books they're reading or books I read to them, so they can keep thinking about the topics I've taught them, and we can keep applying them to the books we read together and the books they read on their own. So, and then like I said, for our reading series, we have Read Aloud / last week it was Sharing Our World, so animal stories. We read a book about an author, like about guinea pigs, so it was about how the guinea pigs he has raised and all the guinea pigs he has. We learned information about having guinea pigs as pets. And we read one called A Friend for Lakota, which was a true story about a pack of wolves and a wolf named Lakota who had been bullied by the rest of the pack, and how one of her friends finally stood up for him and helped him out. So those are the two I know we read for sure. Writing, we didn't really do anything last week. This week I really want to hit expository writing and get diving into that. But again, just trying to get into our routine. It was our second full week, and it was homecoming week, so we didn't quite get to everything I would have liked to. For grammar, I kept doing a little capitalization. I want to wrap up capitalization this week and then get into types of sentences, just to help us as we are progressing in our writing, making sure that we know when to use a period, exclamation point, question mark. Again, I have those lessons and exit tickets on TPT, so those ones are there. So reading, writing, grammar. Secret stories, we've been reviewing it a bunch. Again, in my morning meeting, I've been doing a fact of the day. So last week's facts were all about space, and we find all the secret stories in there during morning meeting, and then we read it together. So we've been just really trying to find those phonics patterns in words everywhere. Moving on to math. As you know, we're using Bridges this year. It's an adjustment, it's a learning curve. This week, a lot of our lessons were introducing more of their what they call workplaces, which are games, which are nice because they'll be able to play those during like our intervention block and during like just different times throughout the day. But those games were most of our lessons. So this week we'll get into, it looks like measurement, and then some addition, and then some addition word problems. So maybe next week I can share more about Bridges, but this week it was really just a few of their workplaces that we did. We did do a fall art project. I'll show you those. They're hanging in the hallway. We went for a little walk. They picked up some leaves. We came back, and then they drew them. They used crayon to outline them, and then we did watercolors. So those are up in the hallway. Let me show you those quick. And last but not least, science. In science, I introduced the scientific method. I have these slides on TPT as well, and these interactive notebook pieces, so let me show you what we did. All right, for science, they each have a science notebook. Again, this is on TPT. So their first tab is the scientific method, and we haven't filled out our vocab, but these are, foldable, so we'll add the definitions for these words. They got those cut out and put in. And then we had already talked about the week before what a scientist is, but I finally got these printed, so we filled that out from that last lesson. Then on Monday I talked about the scientific method and just the steps that scientists take when they are asking a question or trying to find a way to solve a problem or to make something better. And then to apply the scientific method a little bit, we did our first kind of experiment or lab. So we did the coin lab, where they had a penny, a nickel, a quarter, and first they made observations about each. So we talked about using your five senses, obviously not tasting them, but they recorded their observations. And then their hypothesis, they were supposed to write which coin they thought would hold the most drops of water. And then they went through and they used an eyedropper. And before we did this, we predicted how many drops they thought would hold on each coin, and like none of them thought more than 5. They thought it was gonna be like 5 drops of water. So after that, them and their partner went through and did 3 trials for each coin, just again using a little water or a dropper and seeing how many drops of water they could get on there before it all kind of like the surface, surface tension, was too much, and then it came off. But anyways, we didn't talk about that at all. We just saw how many they could hold on before it kind of, the bubble burst and it all came off. And so they did that the first day. The next day we came back and I showed them how to use a calculator to do average. And now this week we'll talk about just like variables, like what could have variables have been in this experiment, and then just come up with our conclusion and just to wrap that up. So that was for science. And with our number corner, which again is part of our curriculum, we've been just identifying these patterns in the calendar, throwing in some multiplication practice, just talking about, okay, we have 4 rows of 5, so 4 times 5 or 5 times 4 equals 20. So that's been another component of our math curriculum. And you can tell it's the third week because our goal this week was blurting, enhance the self. So 2 things we were really focusing on and working on this week. And lastly, we've been working on our reading stamina, so just them getting back in the mood of reading their own books. We've talked a lot about like just how any of the topics we talk about during reading they can apply to their books, like what genre is their book, what point of view is it being read in, what lessons can they learn, and then just being able to read for longer chunks of time. So they ended up reading as a class, and now were there for sure some that were just, zoned out, probably looking at the pictures? Yes, but most of them were actually reading. They beat their goal, which I had of 20 minutes. They got to 23:08. So we're going to celebrate tomorrow, Monday, with a pajama party. So that's awesome. Just that way when we are doing reading in here, at least they're allowing others to be able to focus on their books. So yeah, that was good as well. So for that reading stamina, I really start that the first day of school, and I will have my stopwatch going, and anytime somebody's not reading or up moving around, distracted from their book, I don't say who it was, but I just stop and say, oh, we broke stamina, take a quick break, we're going to restart, and I usually give them like 3 tries each day to see how long they can go for, and I start the year literally oh, that was 2 seconds, we're good, that's all we got, just that way they were like, okay, I can't be goofing around, I can't be looking at my friend, I can't be up and getting drinks the whole time, so gets them in the habit of, hey, when we're reading, that's what we're doing. We're grabbing our books, we're finding a comfy, smart spot, and we're going to read and enjoy our books. So they did awesome with that last week and beat that goal. So we will celebrate that tomorrow. Otherwise, my desk area is a disheveled mess. Hopefully next week I can show you this and it'll be cleaned up some. But that's all I have for you. I am going to get out of here, go home, and watch some football. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you have a great week, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.